play and the ballet.
I saw the play, the ballet. Yeah, I've seen the artwork now. I acted out at home with my cat.
How about the original playing cards, bubblegum cards?
I don't have those, they're too expensive.
Yeah.
I don't know. They might have some of the big ones.
Yeah.
Should we go ahead and play the trailer?
See some installations of fries too.
So I'm going to go ahead and play the trailer to get us started here while we have fun with IT. For those of you who have not seen it recently.
What do you think? White House is coming out live.
My fellow Americans, this is a momentous occasion. It is profoundly moving to know there is intelligent life out there, alien life, and our world will never feel quite the same again. Once you believe,
Martians, please come to Earth, please.
once you rise above fear,
Annihilate! Kill!
it's not be too rash, then you'll be invited. Hi there. Are you interested in the White House? To meet with a new people.
It's so perfect. This is happening to the same thing in the news.
More powerful than the might of America.
I tell you one thing, they ain't getting a TV.
More advanced than the brains of Britain.
Ladies and gentlemen, this could be a cultural misunderstanding.
But be prepared for a few changes to what we know in life.
Jones, right? It ain't unusual.
As we must learn to dance to a new tune. Now listen, whoa. Why can't we all just get along? Run close.
Kick the crap out of them.
Here's Osman.
What, in your view, are some of the things that the Martians can teach us, Professor?
I know about Mars, I expect nothing.
That means
Benedicto.
want to conquer the world? You're gonna need lawyers, right?
And Ellen Manning.
I think they've come to save us.
From director Tim Burton.
Hey, we all make mistakes, Mr. President.
Mars attacks. Not anymore. We're going to take charge of this thing.
No, we're not.
So who you have with us today is you have Wynn Thomas, the production designer, Jim Pegasus, who is the art director, Michael Fink, who is visual effects supervisor.
One of three.
One of three. Well, that's because you left early, right?
No, it's because we have three.
Oh, okay. And Tim Burgart, who finished the movie as the illustrator, as the storyboard artist and illustrator, because
Michael Jackson, whose artwork you can actually see over there. I had a keyframe over there, but he did a bunch of storyboards involving the cross-dressing Martian that went into the White House. You know that scene? Very RuPaul.
yes, very involved.
I just want to give credit to Jim Mitchell and Dave Andrews, who were the other two people who were credited and had credits as visual effects supervisors. They were up at ILM, and they did most of the Martian animation and a few other things. The facility I ran, and what I did is all the saucers, a few Martian shots, the robot,
Okay.
the balloon, like about half the movie, and ILM did the other half.
So, let's begin with how in Samuel did you do this movie? I mean, I'm looking at it and it's like, when I said to Mike, because Mike and I worked together at USC, and I was thinking like, fun movie, and he said, and really hard. So, why don't we start with you and talk about how do you work with Tim Burton? How does Tim Burton work with a production designer?
Hi, everybody. The project came to me in a very interesting way because I think Tim was very interested in working with designers that he hadn't worked with before. So the original producer was a woman named Laurie Parker, who came from the world of independent films, and at that point, I had been working primarily in independent movies. But Tim was, as I said, Tim was actually working with other designers. So that's how I came to the project. And it's interesting enough, James here has a sort of concept book that I had completely forgotten about, which Tim must have been showing to people, so I suspect that he showed that to me in the very beginning. It was based on a series of playing cards that are in card comics, right? That top cards that had been produced many years ago. Yeah, and it was interesting because, you know, as you can see with those cards, everything's very extreme, the color's very extreme, and you can't quite do that with a movie. So what I remember about our early meetings was that we sort of, all of this stuff is kind of based on 1950s sci-fi movies. And that was really kind of a jumping off point for us. And then what became clear in our early conversations is that we wanted the sets to be very graphic, but also very simple. So the approach to each environment was to find an element that would define that set and then build upon that. So when you look at the movie, you can sort of see that pattern playing out from set to set. And it was a very interesting movie to have to work on because you were dealing with quote unquote realities, but then you also had the whole fantasy element of the film. And so the discussions, Tim is a very interesting person to work with because I thought, well, he's going to really be in there trying to control things. But that wasn't what it was. He was very giving, he's an artist, so he understands that every artist has his or her process. So he would really allow us to come up with the initial ideas, and then we would go through the process of showing him those concept drawings, and then he would sort of come in and look at something and sort of move it from like left to right, and all of a sudden have this sort of interesting Tim Burton-esque quality to it. But he was very easy about, he was very lovely about letting everyone come up with their ideas. So I was working with a team of illustrators who were with me for several months, right? And I think, my process is to start off with smaller sketches and then hand those sketches over to the illustrators and the storyboard artists, and then they would develop it further, and that was the process. And James is an incredible illustrator, so he was very much there, part of that process, assisting me in developing the look of the film. And so it becomes, I become like the key idea guy, and then I have this team of people who collaborate with me to develop those ideas. And that's really the joy of the process, is working with your fellow collaborators to make decisions about what it is that you're going to do.
So how did you jump in?
Okay. Well, what Wynn just described, Wynn had the big picture, David overdue, and my job was to assist him in helping manage the department. And Wynn draws as well beautifully, and would do his smaller sketches as he just described. But there was so much in this film that went from everything he just described, stylized sets, from the war room, that was just a magnificent piece with Jack, with the plans. No, yes, is it there?
Yeah.
Okay, which was very kind of Dr. Strange.
Yeah, it was.
The inspiration of, because you want to make that statement. So that was on the lot of Warner Hollywood. We also had to we went from there, and then we had to do the White House, which was more realistic, based on, on existing White House, but still total reconstruction. Then Wynn went wild with the Kennedy date room, that was a secret room in the White House. So that became a fantasy element of real stylized sexualism and erotica, kind of like with seeing everything through the fish tank. And then we had multiple locations all over Kansas, Las Vegas, where we had outside sets. In Las Vegas, we had where they get lost in the signage field. That was an exterior location that we had to dress and prepare. But that's the kind of the gamut of the stuff that was going through his head that he has to take and design. And then as this is coming down, my job was to help disseminate that within the department and make sure that we could do everything that we could do. And we also had the desert landing site. So we were traveling. It was a big travel show with extreme locations. I remember when we left Kansas, it was snowing with the snow flying into the airport. We landed in Phoenix that same day at 92 degrees. So
yeah, we shot in L.A. We shot in Las Vegas, and outside of Las Vegas, we shot in Burns, Kansas, and in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, and Washington. So all those places, and then naturally all the design responsibilities of matching. I mean, I look at everybody here. It's also integral.
We put tanks in front of the Capitol building.
Yeah, I remember we were very limited what we could do.
Can you imagine doing this today?
Oh no, are you kidding? Or unless
Well, actually, Trump would want tanks in front of the Capitol building, but actually.
Yeah, they'd have a big team.
That's another
In
story.
fact, he fought to have them there. at one point.
one of the experiences that I was thrilled by is I had never gone to any nightclubs in Las Vegas, and we were in location in Las Vegas well over a month. And Las Vegas to me was just I don't. But living there and working there, you see a different side. Anyway, where Tom Jones does his bit in the nightclub, we got that for one night. It had a tremendous Las Vegas show where the stage came up with a fountain. It was amazing. And to be able to sit in there and we get to watch Tom do his number was just marvelous. So we had all those kind of things. And I mean, when I think of Las Vegas also, there was a hotel that was destroyed.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't. That's a real.
If you believe that.
Let me. I think. Why don't we go back to
Sure you can.
that initial? Yeah.
Which way do
You'll
you
kind
want
of
to
see,
start?
this is the war room. And then right below that, the next thing, my process, this is my first rough model. I mean, this was the idea model. So very often if I'm not drawing something, I will figure it out dimensionally. So I made this little model, and then the idea of this went back to everybody at the
And this is more of the model.
yeah, that's the rough model floor plan. And then what you have next is the finished model. And then that finished model was made by somebody in the art department. But you can see the development of that set through its various stages. And then we went to the final, if you keep going through the images, that's the final set, you see. So, and again, I remember with Tim, it was all again about very bold graphics. So you can see it's very simply designed, with very simple spaces and shapes. Next, please.
More of that.
Yeah.
So then, Michael, you were doing all kinds of things. You were blowing things up and stuff. The what?
Just coming up with that.
This is a real construction.
Oh, there we go.
Yes, this was a building in Vegas that was scheduled to be demolished, and we were aware of it. And so we came there and in our film, Art Snyder's office, which is a character played by Jack Nicholson, his office is attacked by the Martian. So collectively, the teams had gathered to watch the destruction of this building, which was an amazing thing. I mean, look at this. I mean, this is real time. And we just used it, the whole thing, in our film.
We had 6 cameras, and we had stunt people running toward the camera to they were well saved from anything building, but the whole explosion of the building, that was practical. That was, on purpose. They just scheduled it to fit in our shooting schedule, I guess.
Yes.
We weren't shooting film yet. This was all.
This is
Oh,
very
that's
early
all
in
pre-production.
very
Oh my
we-
gosh.
So we always ended up, I don't know, James, you were on this film for about, I was on it for about 14 months. So that's how long it took. And so this happened very early, not even a it was just something that someone was aware of, so we took advantage of it.
This was the first thing, as an art department that we had to create, because it was early on, is this sign down here at the bottom. That was, we had that made in Las Vegas. But what Lynn's saying is, it was so early, we had to shoot it because the demolition was planned, and we had to shoot it with their planning. We were there early to help prep, replace the sign, everybody's getting set up. We visit the set the day before because they had to do it at 4 in the morning so the dust won't affect the city. And we watched them drill holes and put cord, this explosive primer cord. I've never seen any of this stuff. Anyway, it was all very exciting. And then at around 4 o'clock in the morning, we were staying at the Debbie Reynolds Hotel. You were probably down with the cameras, but I was on the balcony with my son because I wanted him to watch this. And we watched it from the balcony, and it was just stupendous.
Primer cord's a detonating cord, and you have a big beam in the building, and you wrap the cord around it, and you ignite it, fire it. It'll just cut the beam.
And there's one more thing I got.
That's how they make these buildings fall down and fall down where they want them to fall.
And this is something I remember I just want to add because this has to do with Michael. I can't remember what you maybe had to fix, but our physical effects guy was supposed to have a big explosion that didn't fire. Remember that? I don't know. You had to add it. So we were trying to film the event with added effects to make it look as good as we could. But again, not everything goes to plan, and visual effects had to augment all that.
Right. It's, buildings are designed, they don't want a fire. So the demolition of the building looks like a whole bunch of dust. And you don't really see, you might see a little pop, a flash at the beginning, but then nothing. And we wanted to have something that felt more like movie explosion. So we got there.
Yeah.
So the next sketch up is my initial rough sketch for Art Snyder's office. And as James is saying, I will do a rough, as you see, here's his first rough sketch. And then the next couple of photographs are the actual set. And again, you can see it's very simple. And the other thing about this set was that it was all about, in the movie, we were trying to constantly use circles because it's about Earth and about Mars and all that stuff. So there's a repetitive use of circles. The next couple, again, as you can see, this is a rough model that I built. That's my process on these, was to sketch and then do a rough model, show that, and you can see that at some point the globe was above, and then clearly because Jack Nicholson's character is killed by this globe, I lowered it. So, so that, again, this is another model that we built, showing the layout of the set. And if you look very carefully, you can see a sketch on the floor, and that was where special effects was going to come in and build rig platforms to collapse and to move. So, again, these things are working material. We're using them to talk to the director about the approach to shooting and the action that will happen on each particular set. And then that was the final look of it, as you can see.
And there was, this photo doesn't give it justice because the walls, remember, like you had sequins.
That's right. You're coming in.
It drove us absolutely nuts because outside the windows there was a green screen.
That's correct. That's right.
And the sequins quite often, and it moved as the camera moved or anything else. The colors would sweep across the walls. Really beautiful. And Jack was in a sequin suit.
That's right.
But they ran through the entire spectrum, including the color of the screen that was outside the window. So if we just did a normal extraction on the windows, we had little pinholes all over wherever there was that color, and it would change. So
I
we
have
found
no
a
idea.
way to make that.
I was just throwing glitter at things.
It was so beautiful. We have it here.
You'll see the murals, the renderings coming up, as you can see.
It's really amazing.
Yeah.
It's just stunning. I remember walking on the set with Mr. Brown.
So who was doing the rendering?
There's a young woman who was, well, I forgot her name, James, I'm sorry.
Brittany Robin?
But anyway, you can see the elements that we used to create this set. And then, what was next? Keep going.
Six.
One more stuff. Yeah.
Well, you get more close-ups and stuff like that.
That was lovely.
This is great.
And so you can see that was our window, and the screen was outside that window to create.
And the ball, the earth rolls out and bursts through the window.
Yeah.
Jack
Oh,
and
for
with Jack on
heaven's
the ball.
sakes, look at that. Mhm.
So inside, there was Jack, who looked at the editor himself, Chris Levinson himself, looking like Jack was getting picked up on the ball. And then you come outside, and you see a CG ball coming out of the demolishing building.
Right.
With Jack attached to the ball to the CG Jack. Heading.
We did a whole series for the inside of the spaceship. We did a whole series of drawings. That was just one of the early illustrations. That wasn't one of yours. No. And then we did a series of models. I'm sorry, Mark. We did a series of models of the interiors.
Look at this. Wow.
These are, they're 1/2 of an inch equals a foot. Designers, models, size models.
Wynn's talking about the models that he did. The reason that's so important, that sketch is the first impression, and people respond very warmly to that. It's like, oh, that's a cool idea. Then when they see a model of it, they take some better steps. They can start to see it in 3D, and they'll imagine themselves in it. And then each of those steps helps sell the idea, but also helps formalize it, so that when we go to the finish, when you walk on the set, it's a place you've anticipated going for a long time.
The interesting thing about the models and the illustrations, at least from my point of view, from where I was that Tim Burton was in the early days of deciding that maybe digital things were okay. And he really didn't like, he would say, it looks computery if he didn't like it. And at one point, the studio proposed that we expand the film and start including other cities. And they wanted maybe a shot of New York City being attacked by Mars. So we did a concept sketch of a big light shot of New York City with saucers and beams and all explosions and fires. But we did it in Photoshop, and I showed it. It was really nice. And I showed it to Tim, and he went, it's kind of computery. We're not going to do that. So I thought, okay, well, I know Tim, because I'd done Batman Returns. So the next thing we showed him was the Mars landscape, that thing that's put up on the wall over there. And I had one of our artists paint that with paint, right? So you got a board, and we gave him a board. And it's like, think about, if you build it, if you really make it with your hands, there's a visceral, it speaks to you in a way that Photoshop doesn't. And maybe it can now, but not then. And so I showed Tim this concept sketch for taking up the very original Mars sketches that you guys did, and then there was a sketch that Tim did of, it was quite abstract actually, saucers lifting off of Mars, and that was really the inspiration for that one shot. And the shot that's illustrated over there. And I showed it to Tim, it was a painting, and he held it and he rubbed his thumbs over the edge and he said, this is a painting. And I said, yeah, it is. And he said, oh, it's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that
It's a
interesting?
certain mentality.
It is right. Well, what I love is that you actually have a little miniature of the Mars person on this model too.
Yeah.
Well, it was wonderful. The guys at ILM put the Martians in that set,
Oh, gosh.
which they built as a miniature.
Wow.
Winds, illustration, and miniature, and all that stuff. It was a terrific guide for them, so they were able to.
What are we looking at?
John Dexter, who is one of the best model makers and still in the city, built these models. Again, this was the Martian lab where they take apart Sarah Jessica Parker and
Her and the
yeah.
dog.
Yeah, so this was the idea sketch for that, and then this was the actual model, as you can see.
you know, we should say that these designs that we had come up with, we actually constructed the spaceship in scale miniature. Barry Purvis, an English animation director, came from England with his crew to articulate and do stop motion in these sets. The figures were a foot tall, and we built the sets accordingly. And we were in that direction for almost 4 months, 3 months, with beautiful animated work that Tim loved. He loved the articulated stop motion, and that Mike will. It came to pass that the complexity of intertwining the two with the live action and stuff, the decision was to eventually go all digital. But the animation wanted to contain the aesthetic, the stop motion aesthetic of the character. But it's just to show you, when you show it, what's there, these were sets that we built with magnetized floors so the animator could articulate the little puppets. And anyway, so.
Magnetized floor.
Yes,
Because you want a stop motion puppet to walk across the floor.
so what we did was the floor is perforated steel plate with earth magnets, very, very strong. And they put magnets in the puppets, so they walk.
Yeah.
You learn all these things. We learned quite a bit about what stop motion required. And it was great, it was fun. It was fun to do a realistic miniature set in conjunction with the live set that tied together so well. But again, it finally went all digital.
And the reason really for the digital part was that Tim envisioned camera moves. Director of photography was Peter Sushitsky, who's brilliant, absolutely terrific cinematographer. And there were discussions about what the camera was going to do and how. And so if you shot live action, and then you had to do the stop motion Martians walking across that same set at a different scale, you had to match the camera move to the live action camera move exactly. And that took time just to track the shot in so you could match the camera move, and then the camera moved in scaled motion control to the miniature that was stop motion while you're doing stop motion. But the big problem was that if you look at the design of the Martians, which were fantastic, and they came from Tim's original sketches. The helmet is smaller at the bottom than it was at the top, shaped like a light bulb. Right? So there wasn't a way for a stop motion animator to take the helmet off, change the expression on the Martian, and put the helmet back on because the opening on the helmet was smaller than the head. And so then they started dealing with, well, maybe we'll just do the helmet and the head as a unit. And I suggested, why don't we do the helmet CG, and then you don't have to worry about the helmet, you just put the helmet on. Because I knew Tim was absolutely committed to stop motion, but Larry Franco, the producer, line producer, was convinced that it should be, and he was right, the Martian should be all digital. So he secretly, as far as I know, maybe better, sent a couple of the stop motion puppets up to ILM, and they did a quick test using a background from Jumanji of Martians on the street, of mayhem, all the stuff breaking up. And Tim loved it. It was great. That's where, when suddenly we were doing digital Martians.
I'm going to go back to this set that we're looking at here. This set was, we'll go back a few images, please.
Sure.
Thank you. This, yeah.
Right here?
Go one more, please.
Sure.
This is the size, look at this, I don't know if you guys, this was a model that was going to be built for, this was a sequence in the film, which I have on another file, where it was designed, I designed this set, and the whole idea of it was that this was a rally that was going to be held right before the Martians attacked the United States, the world. And it started off with a little paper bottle that I had of about this size, and then this thing was huge. It was probably about the size of this table, and that was just the model, okay? And again, I have the illustrations of what this whole sequence was going to be, because it was a rally, and the guy was come up, and then there's, as you can see, there's thousands of I mean, if you go through
Thousands
these,
of Martians.
look at the size of these miniature,
Yeah.
if you go to the next, I mean, someone built these little,
Little
I
guys
mean,
back
yeah, so
there.
this model was about the size of about this tall. And if you go through the rest of the images, so what happens is, there's a globe that's in the center of the set that rises up, and this martial leader is on the stage, he starts blah, 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 and then he lights a match and the globe burns. So it was very interesting. However, when we went to think about, it was gonna cost $500,000 just to build the miniature. So they decided not to do it. But anyway, kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Money.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
And then the rest of these are, this is one of our sets in Burns, Kansas, and that was just, kind of close up. Again, you guys have this donut shop here in LA, so I took it out to Burns, Kansas.
Exactly what it looked like.
Yes,
Yeah,
it was,
yes,
yes.
exactly.
And, this was a drawing, which is
That's-
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of Tim's.
It is, it's a shot.
So, and then below, if you look, this is, I think these are your drawings, James. Your early concept drawings. And then there's a, we have this Martian hand.
Look at that.
And again, I think coming up, these are again, or more James, these are your stuff, I think. These stuff here. And these were just apparatus and things that we're going to be working in the operating room. And then these are drawings by John Dexter about the actual physical elements that were going to be built for the labs and for the Martian space. So as you can see, it really is an incredible teamwork amongst a wide variety of people. And as I keep saying to people now, the great thing about being a production designer is it allows me to be a dreamer, and then I have all these other people who help execute that dream. So, and these are James's drawings here.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying. The opening of the movie was actually come from this man's head, and then that's what. So, and then it went through other departments, and then other illustrators, and again, it's a collaboration. Yeah. Yeah, that's all James's work.
God, you forget. We did a lot of.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a while. So, we're in a position where,
Can I say one thing about it?
sure, please, anybody.
When we were working on the film, I don't know about you guys, but I had the best time of my life. I mean, I love working with Tim. I've done Batman Returns with him, and I fully appreciated his skill and his talent, his ability with actors and with us. It was great. So we had this wonderful time with this incredible group. Really, really talented people working really hard, and the cast was amazing.
Oh, the cast is amazing.
So, Jack Nicholson would walk on the set, he'd pay hail to the chief. He walked on the set. He played the president and he played Art. So it was two characters, yeah. So it was a wonderful experience. From soup to nuts, it was absolutely great. And then it opened and they did no business at all. It was a huge disappointment.
Well, it came out the year that Independence Day, the original, I don't know if you know, and people were, that movie was a huge hit, and obviously people were interested in invasion films, but not, this was an homage to 1950s sci-fi films and people just weren't interested. But fortunately, I think it has sort of developed, there's a lot of people who are sort of cult attached to
I think it's got legs, though. When you watch it, it's really current. It's like Dr. Strangelove. The two films are like so on the nose for the day. It's really kind of frightening.
Is there a file behind that one?
Yeah. So there you go.
Just wanted to say a couple things about this. If you look over here, Michael Jackson has a whole sequence, and those are what are more commonly referred to as storyboards, because you're actually telling a story along those lines. What I'm doing here, even though they're kind of quick sketches. This is more like what we call a keyframe. And I'm actually not making up everything out of my head. I'm actually using location photographs and set stuff to include the Martians or whatever the action is going on here. The one thing that isn't a keyframe, actually I like Wynn's version better. That has all the funky color Xerox look that they used to have at Canon Xeroxes. You can put a black and white picture in there and it'll come out multicolored. But if you hit the, this one I think is about the only direct collaboration I had with Tim Burton through Wynn, because Tim created that evil Pac-Man design. And I went ahead and did the graphics that they actually put on a retired pinball machine. And how long is it on film? Probably about 3 seconds at most. It was a lot of work. But it was kind of fun to have something that was physically on camera, because that's one thing you don't really do so much when you're a storyboard artist. The action and the work of other people are up there, but things that you actually design don't always make it there directly. You know, it is kind of fun though when they do shoot it exactly like the way you have it. But,
And then this is more storyboards, yeah?
Exactly the way it is.
Yeah.
yeah, because that's what they asked me to do. They said, we're going to do it exactly like this. Can you draw it that way? I said, okay.
Yeah, that's great. So, any questions of anything that you've seen?
I think we can hear you pretty well. I don't know if you can hear
Yeah.
us.
Lots of, there,
You
There's
want
a
to hear about
whole-
the rap party?
yeah. Yes.
So you mentioned that you were doing a lot of really practical effects with the set, the massive set building for the miniatures, and that the whole detail about the magnetized floor is just fascinating. I guess just fascinating. But there's also obviously a mix of CG that was eventually brought in, whether Richard Burton wanted it or not. It sounds like. It's been interesting to kind of watch that progression over time. As technology became more available, we started shifting a lot more towards CG and more computer generated stuff. And then we hit this point where I think Mr. Burton was right. Everything started to look too computery, and we're like, no, let's go back to practical effects. Have you, from working on this movie and having kind of that mix of practical and digital, how have you kind of seen that trend over time with other films kind of again kind of integrating both the practical and the digital together?
I think it's tragic, frankly, but that's probably because I'm an older guy. One of the things that we were trying to do on this movie was to do things in camera. So we did as much as we could through special effects. I mean, there was things collapsing in Vegas that made them collapse. I mean, I'm on a movie now where literally the visual effects people are there every single day to talk about the smallest things that you used to do in camera. I don't, it confuses me, but that's all right, so, but what's happened is that in a perfect world, the idea of what those visual effects are going to be are still being generated in the art department. But that balance has changed, and visual effects is now articulating certain things that we used to generate in the art department.
There's did everybody see Missing Link this year?
Oh, I love it.
Okay, if you saw Missing Link, it's an animated film, but all traditional stop motion animation, right?
From Leica.
From Leica. It's also cinematically beautiful and traditional in that the camera moves are moving to a real set. So there's a real physicality that ties in with live action that you get that makes you feel great. Now, they're the exception. They did a great job. So many films now, because of what they're asking to have happen, the unifying animation with live action, that's where Michael can extrapolate on that, but that digital process is such a cost saving If the aesthetic is there, that's beautiful, because that's what makes the tie-in and the art and everything. But the actual, I think it's mostly a cost efficiency. And like he said here, it was so expensive with Peter talking and what they wanted to do, and I've experienced that on other films as well, and it always becomes an issue. And the CGI won out because of its efficiency and its cost. But, like Wynn said too, there's still an appreciation, and when you see something, and that's why I mentioned the Leica film, it is beautiful, that stop motion. And I can appreciate it, and I'm so glad that film came out.
So the integration of live action, visual effects, special effects. The special effects supervisor on the show was Mike Lanteri. He's famous, Academy Award winning, Jurassic Park, that kind of thing. Fantastic guy. So don't want to leave him unmentioned because all those crumbling rooms and buildings are nice. And Wynn's right. If you can get it practically, you really should try to do it. But people look. One thing that film producers can really measure is how much it costs per day to shoot a movie. And a lot of other things that are made up on as you go along. And you find a camera position you didn't plan on and you want to shoot it, but then it means we're seeing off the set, and suddenly we have to extend Wynn's set somewhere where it didn't previously exist. But you know, on this film and other films that I've worked on, we really try to do as much practically as we can. But the producers are looking at making their day. The line producer's only on for the live action part. So they don't care what happens to the budget in post. They only care how much you spend while you're shooting. So if they can make their day and say, oh, we're not gonna have to do, cleanup for take 2 on any of this stuff, would have been huge. So if we have to do take 2, it's going to take us another day. We'll have to redress the set and come back another day. If we do it digitally, we shoot and we're done. So there's a big push for people to do digital stuff. And I'm older than Wynn, so I feel like we shouldn't do this. That maybe the practical stuff is, and it's so much fun. When you do it safely. And in the earlier days when I started, and at least one person in this room about my vintage, doing a visual effect was an added cost option. Right? If you did it, it was going to cost them more money. And now visual effects has the opportunity to actually reduce costs, which didn't happen before. So now it's being embraced. And the photoreality of a great deal of it is, some of the stuff is just superb. You can't tell whether it's practical or digital. And it's getting more and more like that every day. And with virtual production, you can plan out the movie, you can figure out what part Wynn builds, what part we build, where it goes from there, how it gets lit. You can do work with the cinematographer on camera moves, all before you've shot the movie. So you're really moving along more efficiently and telling the story better. You come up with storytelling ideas earlier in the process. So there's some real advantages, but again, that old school, visceral, wonderful thing. And of course, the great thing is that if you're shooting a lot of this stuff, you're shooting at different frame rates. You didn't see it as it was meant to be seen until the next day. And so there's all this wonderful anticipation of dailies the next day. Not easy like that.
And you had to learn you also had to know how to read a negative.
Yeah.
Yes, when you were doing that, because it was all mechanical process. So, are there any other questions? Now I'm going to ask the bonus question. I want you each to give us a little bit of how you got started in this wacky business.
It's really weird at this point when people ask me that, because it's usually on the terms of, how do I get in this business? And it's like, I started in a cave with, etching out mastodons and little stick figures with spears, because it almost as relatable to it as that. I have students right now at Art Center that I have both entertainment design students who are coming in from the art track, and I have film students who are coming in from wanting to be cinematographers and directors, and they're taking a storyboarding class from me. And there's some basics. You know, first of all, you get the job. First of all, you know how to do the job, then you go out and do the job. So I came out of animation and comic books, and you know, I had some help. I actually did something that probably doesn't exist anymore, where I was cleaning up. Well, actually, yeah, it exists. Cleaning up storyboards. You know, because it's basically an assembly line, like putting together a Ford. Only the difference is it's done, well, no, there is no difference, it's done internationally, you know, but we did it in Hollywood at the time. And, you know, so I learned some of the basics working over people who actually knew the job firsthand. So after working in animation for a while, I got into doing commercials, had an agent who got me into commercials. I went on Stargate, and Stargate, which was also an interesting thing because it was just at the beginning of digital stuff. Peter Rubin was maybe the first person I ever saw do digital storyboarding, because he actually had, not only was he doing whatever the prototype of Photoshop was, but he had, they had taken photos of an actual model. How many people remember Stargate? There was a moment, there was a village that was out in the desert. They built that model and they put it in outdoors in a courtyard, so it had the natural light and the real shadows that would be there when they built the actual set. So at 1 o'clock, the shadows would be cast about the same time that it would be in real life. And so they had pictures that they took, they scanned them in, because it was the beginning of digital photography back then too. And Peter Rubin would actually draw figures and stuff in those photos. But anyway, I worked there for 30 days, and that qualified me to get into the union. And once that happened, I was qualified to work on any union picture. And you know, I worked on some duds, but you know, eventually I got around to working on things like, you know, Mars Attacks, and right after that was Batman and Robin, but less said about that the better. Yeah, the trouble is, I can't watch that for 15 minutes. I have to turn it off. You would all start it at any point in the film, and I just start cringing. Yeah, but I watched this whole thing from the very early. James Hegedus right here, I worked with him on the first Jumanji. He brought in a scanner. I don't know if they made him any bigger than the 8.5 by 11 stuff, but he did little paintings, 8.5 by 11. And then he had scanned in, there was a set for Jumanji that was like an interior hallway, courtyard, drawing room, library. And then he did his little miniature paintings on the wall, and then he went into an art book and scanned real Rembrandts and stuff and stuck them in there. By the end, you kept reusing that sucker, because there would be, rhinos would run through the wall, and he would do the damage, or the rhino would go through it.
Yay.
So
that's great.
So that's like the earliest data, and we were working with people who were doing using architectural software to do wireframe set designs.
Sure.
And I would actually use some of them, and because it was a virtual camera, we could do a movie camera, like a crane shot, where the perspective changed as you're going over.
Tim, in light of time, we need to sort of move a little bit. So Mike has a checkerboard background too.
I'll talk fast. Yeah, I try to hide most of my past. So you don't want to know about that. When I was around 8, 9, 10 years old, I got very interested in building miniatures. I was born in 1944, so World War II loomed large, and I started building miniatures of airplanes and jeeps and tanks and all kinds of military stuff. You know, you're a little boy in the Sacramento Valley, and I have dirt for a backyard, so it's like, perfect. And then my father had found a camera on the L in Chicago when he lived in Chicago in 1939, and he still had it, a little dual twin lens Rolleiflex. And I loaded it up to film and started taking pictures of Tableau that I built when I was 9 and 10. And I was a huge fan of space movies. So, you know, Destination Moon or whatever it's called is a real favorite of mine. And, you know, Earth versus Flying Saucers is a huge reference for Tim in this movie. And if you watch a lot of the saucer animation, it's almost shot for shot out of Earth versus Flying Saucers. So I was doing pictures in the hallway. My parents, we had this little house, and there was a hallway, and if you closed all the doors to the hallway, there were no windows. So it was my soundscape, except there's no sound. And I could only do stills, because my family didn't have enough money for a movie camera, and I wouldn't have known what to do with it anyway. So I do stills of a rocket to the moon taking off with cotton, backlighting the cotton with a flashlight. So that's how I started kind of getting involved in this. And then I went to a career in business. I was in the Army. I wound up at Cal Arts, getting a master's degree. I got hired at Cal Arts. I left Cal Arts to work on a movie. And the very first day I showed up on the movie was 6 o'clock in the morning. This was after working 4 days a week at Cal Arts for about 6 hours a day and barely surviving. And then suddenly I got hired on this film, and they said, show up at 6 o'clock in the morning. And I did. And I went home at midnight. And I came in at 6 in the morning and left at midnight, 7 days a week for the first 6 weeks I was on that movie. I thought, oh my God, what have I got into? But I thought I died and gone to heaven. I thought it was the best thing that had ever happened to me. It was just by chance. I really just needed a job that gave me enough money to make my art. And I needed a way to save money and go back to my studio and make art. And so I was going to work on a movie for 6 months, which is what I did with Giant Syndrome. That was the first film. And then I was going to go to my studio. I went back to my studio. It was lonely. It wasn't that intensely collaborative, creative environment that filmmaking is. And I had been given all this freedom on this film. China Syndrome was on schedule, on budget, wonderful crew, wonderful cast, fantastic. I thought that's the way films got made. They were all like that. That was my only experience. It took me years before I repeated it. But that's how I got started. And really the big start was War Games, when it was my first visual effects supervisor credit, where I came on. I had a friend in the art department, and he called me up and said, you ought to see what we're doing here. I was out of work, I finished late, and I didn't have anything to do. And I go in and we have lunch, and he shows me all the illustrations on the walls, and that's as far as they were on that film. And it was pretty exciting. And while I was there, they called a meeting. I went into the meeting, and they invited me, come on in, sit down, and have talk to us. So we started talking about how they were going to shoot the film, and I said everything. And then I went home, and the next day I thought, well, I've only got time for, I don't have I have nothing else to do. I'm on unemployment. So I went back to War Games and sat in again on a couple of meetings. I did that for 3 weeks. I found a desk and a phone in the production office.
They were paying you?
They were not paying me. They didn't even know who I was. But people start bringing me stuff to do. Mike, how are we going to do this? Do you think we can connect this to that? How do we shoot that? So 3 weeks into that, the producer looked at me in the middle of a meeting and said, are we paying you? And I said, no. And he said, oh, we got to fix that. And that was my first visual effects supervisor credit, and that was really what launched it.
That's fabulous. So, James, what happened to you?
After graduation from college, my wife and I moved to Los Angeles, and I got a job at Hanna-Barbera Animation Studios, doing Scooby-Doo, Captain Caveman, all their product for 2 years. During that time, I fell in love and wanted to do live action. Went to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, took a seminar on the Magnificent Seven, production designers. So this is my hint to you. They were all a generation above me. They were my parents' age. They were working, they were great. They were the people who made Hollywood in the studios, and I wanted to learn from them. I pursued them all. I met one who took me under his wing, John McCure, and I mentored with him for 4 years, all while working at Hanna-Barbera. I'm telling you this part because that older generation had the knowledge. They created the knowledge. And to have direct access to it was the gift. And I think also I love old movies. The history of the film business. And these people were that history. So I got to access it. And I'm gonna be brief and tell you how I met Win. One of this older generation, Harold Michelson, he was one of these talents. He invited, Win and I didn't know each other. We were very, very young. He invited us to lunch at Paramount. We were just, I wasn't even in the business. I mean, I'm not in the union yet. And I meet this young guy. And he meets me. And we're with Harold. We don't, two different worlds. And then many years later, we come back and Win and I meet on Mars Attacks. I tell you that because when people say, how do I get in? Well, I got stories of things that I did, but it was this joy of, and the history, these people. And they were still alive, and I had access to them, so I pursued it. And I was just very fortunate that one took me under his wing, but introduced me to all of them. And all of us doing the same brought us together. And I really, if you are interested in pursuing film, study its history, because it's very young. It's 120 years. And there are, if you can access those people and carry their knowledge forward, it was a real gift to me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I'm sorry, we're it's
I
so
wanna be
running
brief.
out of time, and I want Win to say something too, because he's actually has it.
Well, I would tell you a brief version of mine. I've been working in the theater as a set designer for many, many years. Theater is my passion, was my passion, is my passion. But I was tired of being poor, so I had already been in the union as part of being I got into the union in New York City, which allowed me to pursue television and film work. I interviewed with every major production designer in New York City. Everybody said no to me because I had no practical experience. There was a movie coming to New York City called The Cotton Club, being designed by a very famous production designer named Richard Silbert. It was a big deal that he was in town. The union invited him by to have a talk with its members. I was one of 60 people in a room, and I was the sole black person in that room, okay? But meanwhile, I'm telling you this because I was desperate to get in, and to get a job in the film business. So the next day I called the Cotton Club office. Someone picks up the phone. I say, can I speak to Dick Silbert? And first she says, well, you know him? I said, yeah, I know him. My feeling was I met him at the meeting. I didn't meet him, but I saw him at the meeting last night, so I know him. Anyway, he gets on the phone and I say, Mr. Silbert, my name is Win Thomas. I'm the black guy that was in the room last night. Do you remember seeing me? So he kind of laughed at that and said, yes, I remember seeing you. And I said, look, I have this proposition for you. I've been trying to work my way into the business. Nobody wants to hire me. Can I come in? Can I show you my drawings and my sketches? And if you like me, I'd like to volunteer for you. Okay, we have no jobs. The art department's completely booked. Blah, blah, blah. This is the short version of the story. I went in a few days later, showed him my portfolio. Again, no jobs available. But if you want to come in and do some research for me, fine. That Monday I went in, this is a quick version of the story so we're running out of time. I went in, started doing some research for him in his office, which was really weird because I always, I don't know why I was in his office, but I was. And throughout the morning I was asked to leave because he was having private conversations with, a bunch of people. Anyway, the line producer of the movie, these are called production managers, came in and said, the movie is being directed by Francis Ford Coppola. And the line producer came in and said, well, Francis Ford Coppola is going to need models of all the sets when he gets back from Japan. Get somebody to make these models. So their conversation in terms of the budget, I was asked to leave the office for the 4th time that day. So you can imagine how I felt, awkward in the way, all that sort of stuff that you feel. 10 minutes later, Dick comes out and says, "You build models, don't you?" And I said, yeah, I build models. He said, "Well, let's hire you to build these models." So I had been there for 4 hours. At the end of that 4 hours, I got the last job in the art department. And I was hired for 2 weeks, and the 2 weeks turned into 6 months. And literally, because I was working for the best production designer in the country, literally all the barriers came down. Because when I went to interview for another job, Dick would pick up the phone and give me a good recommendation. And the great thing about, to pull us back to Mars Attacks, I don't know how many years it was later, but the whole thing was, many years later, I'm on Warner Brothers Live doing Mars Attacks, and Dick is there. I'm doing the big picture, and Dick is doing another picture there. And he was so proud of me. But, so that's how that happened.
Thank you.